What are the new humans, and how are the star children revealing who we really are, what we can accomplish in a human lifestyle, and what is coming for planet Earth? Stay tuned. It's Karen on Accentuate the Positive on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network. Mary Rodwell is coming up.
You got to accentuate the positive. I feel good. A little bit of feel good goes a long way.
You're listening to Karen Swain, teacher of deliberate creation, accentuating the positive, showing you a way to a better life.
Accentuating the positive, it's not just fad, it's sanity. Who in their right mind would accentuate anything else?
If you feel like that's what you want to do.
G'day, and welcome to another show, Accentuating the Positive, with Karen Swain on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3 FM. And look who's in the house. Yay, Mary Rodwell. Welcome, Mary. Welcome to the show.
Oh, bless you. Wonderful to be talking with you again, Karen. It's been a while.
Oh, Mary's one of my favorites. I love Mary. I've got people saying g'day already. Shirley is online. Cindy, hello. Yeah, Mary and I have been yakking for about almost half an hour already. We've almost done the show in the last half an hour. We just started talking. I'm sure there's Alison. Hi, Alison. I'm sure many people know who Mary Rodwell is. She's an Aussie, another Aussie, bringing the Australian flavour out there. Woohoo! But for people who don't know who Mary is, let's read the bio. Let me tell you a little bit about Mary. Called the Alien Lady. Are you still called the Alien Lady after all these years?
Yeah,
People still call you the Alien Lady?
And Mary Roswell as well. So whatever.
That's fantastic, Mary Rodwell. Mary's been helping people activate and remember their life's calling, their multidimensional selves, while supporting and counselling the difference makers, StarSeeds, wanderers, light workers, light weavers, whatever you want to call them, who are here to transform this world for over 30 years. Recognised internationally as Australia's leading researchers, hypnotherapists, and writers in the UFO and contact field, Mary is the author of the highly acclaimed book Awakenings, How Extraterrestrial Contact Can Transform Your Life in 2002, and the producer of the EBE award-winning documentary Expressions of ET Contact, a visual blueprint, and Expressions of ET Contact, a communication and healing blueprint in 2004. And her book, The New Human, describes and documents the star children. That was 2016 that came out, wasn't it, Mary?
Yes. Yeah.
The New Human. And have you written one since? Another one since? No, I think that was the last.
I've been pushed, but at the moment, no. Maybe down the track, sure.
Now, this is an old book. I've had Mary on the show many times, probably over the last 10 years. So this might be an old book, but it says here that you've researched more than 3,000 cases. It's probably a lot more since then.
Yes.
Yeah. Of extraterrestrial encounters. And are a global phenomena. This is evident in the new humans referred to as the star children. Mary affirms that the star children exhibit a maturity and wisdom beyond their years and have an awareness and connection to spiritual realms called the Indigos or crystal children. They're also known. They have telepathic abilities and are spiritually awakened and can describe many species of non-human visitors with a feeling that they are as real to them as their real families because they feel supported by them. And your website, got a few, but you can still contact Mary at acern, acern.com.au. And Trudy says, hi, Karen and Mary, so glad to catch you live. Good morning, Karen and Mary. So awesome to have you on the show. Yeah, so we've been all around the universe already. I said to Mary, how are you? And she's like, lots happening.
Yeah.
So let's get into what the awakened ones, what the new children are saying about what is happening on the planet at the moment with the energies. Have you been, receiving that information through your clients?
Absolutely. And more I'm hearing from parents with children, mostly 10 or even younger than 10, that are explaining how they're different, that they've come here from somewhere else. They may explain the planet they're from. They may even explain that they're not fully human. And I've got several that have described being part human, part one young 8-year-old explaining she's part human, part water being because she comes from a water planet. And then she's still part of the water being on this planet. When she looks at herself in the mirror, it's the water being that she's actually seeing, and actually drew herself as a water being. But what was fascinating was her abilities. And this
Wow.
is what I want to, talk about, is the fact that they have far more awareness of a multidimensional reality. For her, when she listens to music, for example, she follows the frequency. She doesn't just hear it. She follows the frequency to the very person who's created the music. So she understands the feelings and emotions of what created that music in the first place. So there's a whole new depth to their understanding. And this is what is very confusing to parents, because it's beyond their particular reality and they're really seeking answers. So this is really, though, evidence that there are so many of these new humans, new generations of humans. I mean, we're all, I believe, part of that. We're all starseeds on some level, I believe, anyway. But these are activated in a far more profound way. We're still waiting for the wake-up call, I think, some of us, although it's happening for many right now. And that's why I'm so busy.
Yeah, we were just talking about how people find Mary, because she's up in Agnes Waters, which is far north Queensland. I don't know how far away from Sydney. It was miles away from me, and it's pretty remote out there. I was thinking, gee, how do you get there? You've got to catch a plane to Brisbane and then a plane to Bundaberg, and then there's no public transport. You've got to hire a car to get out there. So it's not easy to get to you, and yet Mary has people that come from all over the world to find you. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, absolutely. But the beauty of technology is now I do many, many sessions over Zoom or Skype, which actually enables me to do a regression, for example, in Poland. As long as they can speak English, I can work with them, or Brazil, or, Russia, or whatever it is. As long as they have English language with whatever it is that they're wanting to explore, I can actually work in hypnosis with them. So that really has enabled my workload, if you like, to be facilitated, because they don't all necessarily have to come physically. Some prefer to come physically. But talking about the weird and the wonderful, I've had several people. Now, this is the weird bit, is somebody said to me, well, I had to contact you because in my dream, I was told to contact Mary Rodwell. I had no idea who Mary Rodwell was, hadn't got a clue, didn't know if you were real, didn't know if I was making it up, and then found out you were actually a real person. So all I can say is there's another level to this that has nothing to do with me, but to do with whoever it is that's orchestrating all of this, because that's actually quite bizarre, isn't it? That's happened a few times where they've been told intuitively, not even knowing who I am, that they needed to get in touch. So there's no rest for the wicked, really, is there?
Love it. I love it. It's fantastic. That's fantastic. I was on Dolly and Preston's show. Preston did it, and
Yeah.
Dolly received that same information from her ET family. You need to contact Preston. He's got it sorted out. And so the ETs told her to contact Preston. Same thing. Yeah, that's so great. So have you met your ET family, Mary? Have you?
Oh, now you're getting into Mary's weird and wonderful world. Let's say that I've had connections for a lot of years, and that was primarily because I joined a group, a closed group, which were working multidimensionally and being shown how to operate in that way, the tools to make you more effective and give you, confidence. And I remember it was a professional group in the sense that the two were clinical psychologists who a naturopath, or I think was a nursing sister, and a trance medium were in the group. And I remember thinking, well, if I'm going round the bend, I'm going round the bend in good company. So that sort of gave me a certain amount of, but there were things that I never believed I could access, because I felt actually that I was a fairly normal, kind of grounded kind of person, ex-nurse, And I just realized from that everybody has these abilities. It's just that they get suppressed often as a youngster, maybe due to the religious beliefs or educational beliefs, scientific beliefs, or whatever. So people don't always honor those abilities, and often then start looking at that when they're older and feeling less constrained and realizing that they had those abilities all along. It's just that it wasn't acknowledged, because we're only taught to value, certainly in Western society, the five senses obviously are the only ones that you value. You don't listen to intuition because that's a bit weird. It's all your imagination, isn't it? All these kind of ways to shut down that part of you that's actually guiding you into your multidimensional awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. Mary and I were discussing before we pressed the recording. We were discussing the documentary you made with your son. Maybe I can see if I can bring this up. Let me have a go. We were having a bit of a play with this before. No, I don't think I can. Anyway, and so you made a documentary with your son, and I was saying, how many years ago? It was about 15 years ago. What was the documentary called again? My Mum Speaks to Aliens?
My Mum Talks to Aliens, and it was 2010, and it was shown on SBS twice a year for at least 5 years, I think. Then it went global and even had it translated into various languages and whatever. So it's still out there. You can see it on YouTube for free if you want to. But what I was with that was really the reason I did it more than anything was it was playing up the difference between my work and my son's, if you like, his own perspective on reality, if you like, and being, if you like, to a certain extent, the scientist skeptic saying, well, how can you prove to me this is real, all this kind of stuff. What was important about that is it highlights so many families that have this problem where someone in the family is having experiences. And even though they may know that other members of the family are having experiences, the other members don't want to talk about it. They're too fearful, or they shut it down, or say you're crazy, or all those kind of things. So it actually highlighted that dilemma. Not that it was a big deal between, believe it or not, between my son and myself. He's very respectful and very honoring. It's just the world he doesn't particularly want to enter more than anything else. But it highlighted that and how it can cause enormous problems. And I've had so many experiences contact me saying, I can't talk about this to my family. I can't talk about it to my relatives. They all think I'm crazy, or my friends think I'm crazy. And the other part of that is taking that one step more. In a book I wrote about it in The New Human, is a young adult Indian boy, or man, should I say, saying, Mary, he wrote to me saying, Mary, I'm a starseed. I've always known I'm a starseed. But he said, my family and my countrymen have about 100 or so gods. He said, and they all think they're gods and they worship them. He says, but I know they're ETs. And he said, but I can't say anything because they wouldn't actually understand. So this is really highlighting the difference in terms of people's experience and beliefs, and how that can cause so much upset and confusion and fear. Yeah,
absolutely. And I was asking Mary about her son, and she was saying that particular son has just, ignored the whole conversation and just gone into the mainstream world, doesn't look at it, doesn't think about it. And I was asking the question, like, why? Because, I've had a lot of ridicule from my friends and people I went to school with and family. They just think you're crazy and all that sort of stuff. And the question begs why? And the answer is they don't see what we're talking about as having any value in their life. When they're thinking about how to make money, how to be healthy, how to be happy, they don't see that this conversation talking about aliens and ETs and star children has any value in their life. And so I want to discuss how it does have value in everybody's life. Like, what does this phenomena, what does this understanding who we are as multidimensional beings and our connection to the cosmos and the galaxy and higher, intelligence, how does that help us as humans?
Well, it's a very good question. And when I woke Awakening, how extraterrestrial contact can transform your life, is because it does. In those that are embracing their experience, it completely transforms their lives. And we did research with the Dr. Edgar Mitchell Free Foundation, which is I was one of 4 of the founders. There was Ray Hernandez, a lawyer who'd had experiences, Dr. Rudy Shield and Dr. Edgar Mitchell were all part of the founding of this foundation. The surveys that we did, 600 questions, 4,200 people, 10 countries globally. One of the fascinating things that came out of it that literally confirmed my own research was that 85% of those that had extraterrestrial experiences and encounters had a psycho-spiritual transformation. Now, you think about what that means, their whole philosophy, the way they viewed the world, the way they viewed their life, the whole way they looked at life. It became more multidimensional. They started to feel the connection with everything. They started to change their diet. They wanted to do healing or work in a holistic way. They found themselves feeling connected to everything and connected in consciousness. All materialistic values disappeared. That meant nothing to them anymore. And so in terms of 85% of those 4,200 are saying, this is how it changed my life ultimately, and completely altered the way they viewed everything in their world. Now, that in itself is telling you why it's important, because what does that mean? They're told about we can't destroy the planet, for example, in terms of ecology. When you've got an 8-year-old saying, I talk to animals and I want humans to understand they have a consciousness and we have to treat them with respect. You've got them looking, as I say, at different ways of behaving, looking at the way that we're all connected. That is all really important, positive transformations that are coming. And that's why it is important we understand these intelligences and their impact on us as an intelligent species.
Hallelujah. I'm hearing you. There's just so much benefit to this conversation. We're still in 2020, 2024, we're still unraveling the social conditioning that, aliens you're crazy. Like we've been this sort of happened where it's been pumped out through our media systems that if you do talk about this stuff and believe in this stuff, that you're not of value to society and that you're crazy and all that sort of thing. But when you think about it, what these beings bring to humanity, how we're evolving humanity, the telepathic abilities, the psychic abilities, the technology that they have to clean up the oceans, to clean up the pollution on the planet, to change the energy system, the way we propel our vehicles, the way we produce our food. It's just every part of society can be transformed and evolved through the connection with either telepathically connected to your Star Nation family or your multidimensional selves, or that physical connection. I mean, in every way, shape, or form on this planet, we can transform this planet through that connection. I think it's one of the most important things we can think about, Mary.
Oh, look, when you realize that we're connected to so many of these intelligences, that in itself means that, don't you want to know who you are, why you're here, what's it all about? I mean, this is the big questions. Anyone who has time in their lives to think about it, you want to know, is there a point to all of this?
Yeah.
Why am I here? What does it all mean? Surely you don't want to go through your life just thinking it's about, growing older and going to school and getting a job and then paying your mortgage and then getting, if you like, a limited retirement before, you become too old to enjoy anything and you're glad to leave the planet. Is that all there is, guys? I mean, it's not a pretty picture, is it? You know what I mean? Unless there's a reason, unless there's a purpose to it. There's got to be, to make any meaning, there's got to be a purpose. And for any thinking person, surely you want to see there's more to life than that. And the only way you can discover that is if you open to that other part of you that's connected to the consciousness of who we all are, connected to the greater reality, connected to other intelligences that actually make it worth, give you sustenance in terms of your spiritual sustenance, because then things start to make sense. And the only way that I can make sense is to see this as a soul journey that is enhancing my awareness, my understanding, my soul self, to growing and changing and learning. And this is what I get when I do hypnosis for people with past lives, for example. You know, when you take somebody from a past life, it doesn't matter what period of they may explore, where they see their own death, and then they're suddenly seeing themselves in a new frequency or another place that's usually very beautiful and very lovely, with maybe a family member or a guide. And I've said to them, what did you learn in that life? What was the purpose of your soul journey in that life? And they may say, well, I learned about limits, or I learned about compassion, or I learned more about love, or whatever. And I did quite well in this. And they're looking at their own journey. There's no one standing there telling them they're good or bad, but their own soul is looking at what they gained and what they still got to work on. And they'll often say, I've still got to work on this, or I've still got to work on that. And then talking about incarnating in this life, and actually saying, you know, I chose my parents to help me on this journey, and my siblings, each one of them is going to teach me something, or whatever. And this goes back to those, getting back to those that go in hypnosis to onboard craft, and they're seeing their experiences with some of these beings. Some of them they may even connect to and say they're family. And I'll say, did you consent to this experience? And 9 times out of 10, they'll say, yeah, I did, before I came here. It was part of my mission, my purpose. So then you see a whole huge matrix of awareness and understanding and purpose that resonates on some deep, deep level and starts to make sense to what's going on down here. If you're cut off from that, which so many people are in the Western world, then 3D doesn't make any sense at all. It just seems to be a long life of slavery for many people.
Yeah.
Doesn't make any sense
Yeah.
unless you have that connection to that understanding. And that's what people are doing now, especially in the last few years, particularly since 2012. There's been a huge activation of people, but even in the last few years, particularly, they're suddenly being drawn to, I want to find out more about myself. Now, I had this experience when I was a child. What did that mean? I saw some weird beings at the end of my bed. What did that mean? There's a real drive now to uncover the mystery of their own reality and experience, to make sense of things. And it's starting to really shift the whole understanding of why we're here, what's it all about, and what is my purpose. And as many are saying, my mission on this planet as a soul. So that opens up a whole new realm of awareness and understanding.
Yeah. You said 9 out of 10 say when they're in, you know, connected to their higher self or their soul, or when they're speaking, you know, outside of a life form, either here or on other planets, that they agreed to the experiences they had. So what about that 1% that say they didn't agree to those experiences? What's going on there?
It's a good one. And I'll give you an example of that. It was a beautiful young lady I knew many years ago, and I've heard this similar. She saw herself as a dual consciousness, which is part human, part ET. And so this was quite a traumatic experience that she'd had. And I said, did you on any level consent to this? She said, well, yes, in the sense that my ET self was fine with it. But my human self didn't realize it was going to be so difficult.
Yeah.
So she said, you know, it's the human aspect that was struggling, because she said, I didn't realize it was going to be so hard.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've had many people on the show that talk about that. So from your soul's perspective, what you're experiencing on planet Earth, for the most part, you've agreed to as an experience to learn. But when you come back into the ego self, the human self, there is much resistance. I didn't sign up for this. I don't want any of that. It's like we're in that pushback against everything that's happening. I don't like that. I don't like you. We're in judgment. So from that perspective, that's the part that says, I didn't want this. But it's not their soul or their higher self, or whatever we want to call that divine aspect, that didn't agree. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. And I think sometimes also we don't always tap into our superconscious oversoul self, which is orchestrating everything. Because I believe ultimately from the oversoul, everything is being orchestrated and only certain awareness is filtered through so that we actually grow from it. Because if we understood everything, then there's no point in experiencing it. It's about not understanding from one level and not having the information so that you work through from a very real level the experience that you're meant to gain from or understand from. Because it's like anything. It's like two people reading about having an appendectomy. The person who's read about it is never going to understand what it's like to have the appendectomy, whereas the person who's had that particular procedure will be able to tell you in graphic detail how it was for them. And this is, it's the difference between the theoretical and the practical. And we're having to be very much in the energy of that. And it's painful. It hurts, especially if you don't have an understanding of what's behind it. And you don't have your intuition or your gut, your own sense of, is there a purpose to all of this? Then it just seems like madness. Why do so many leave the planet? And there's many leaving the planet right now because they haven't still got that access to saying the reason for this is because of this. So they, depression is very much when they're still trying to link to the understanding, but have not managed to do it. And so they give up. Because without the understanding behind why certain things have happened and realizing the gift that they may be, then it's all dark. Where do you go with that unless you're not connected?
Yeah, that's a big one, Mary. That's really big. I always say depression is your soul talking to you that you're not fulfilling your life's plan. You're not on track. You're swept up in what you think you should be or who you think you should be, and then there's like, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to be famous or successful or have a mortgage or get married and have 2.2 children. It doesn't interest me. But then, maybe I should want that and I don't want that. So like they're depressed and there's something else there waiting for you. There's something else that you're here to do. And that's, my guides have said to me, that's millions upon millions of wanderers, starseeds, whatever you call it, have elected to be on Earth to change the human consciousness at this time. But many of them, probably not most, but many of them get swept up in the human ego and the pain and the suffering, and they don't actually fulfill that. I suppose if they're coming to you, Mary, they're on the path of fulfilling that. But do you see that amongst the star children, that they feel? No, I suppose you don't. Anyway, what's the question? That they're not fulfilling their life path?
The only thing I'll say about that is I've got quite a number, often very aware, because they want to know, they're saying, I want to know what my mission is, what is my purpose or whatever. They'll come to me and I'll say, so what is it that's, you want to look at? And they'll say, well, I actually don't know. I just know I have to come and see you. So it's like, okay, so we're going to have to explore what it is that's brought you here, because even you consciously don't even know or whatever. The other thing they'll say to me is, I want to know if I'm on track. I'm on mission and what have you. And my first response to that is, of course you are. You can't fail to be on mission because your soul isn't going to let you miss the bus. So whatever, it's going to make sure that you get on track. But it may not, what their idea of the mission is, may be a lot more grandiose or somehow very, very specific, when in fact sometimes it's just them bringing in their light, literally just being, anchoring the energy and not doing anything but being. And what a lot of them also don't always realize is how much work they're doing out of body as well. So it's not just what they're doing on a physical level, but they're going out of body, working on multiple levels with these intelligences. And what people may not know from the survey that we did with all this 4,200 people was that we discovered that 75% of encounters are out of body. Only 25% are physical. So you think about what that actually suggests. And what, when they, you get from the nuts and bolts of ufology, it's a pity they can't bring something back from the craft. Well, if you've only got 25% actually going on board craft physically, that's a different ball game anyway. Most of it seems to be primarily out of body. And so what do they do out of body? Well, some of them actually move into a form on board craft. And that was an interesting one, because I remember this 8-year-old explaining to me that when he goes on board craft, he actually connects to the mantis beings as his ancestors, and said, I evaporate into a mantis body for a short time. So he literally feels his soul or spirit is going into that form for a time. And another lady described to me that when she's on board craft, she saw herself as a grey being, a scientist, doing experiments and various scientific research on board craft. And I said, well, where's your human body? And she said, oh, it's over there, sort of waiting for me, like in suspended animation almost. And I said, so how do you get from being in the Zeta body back to your human body? And she described a ball of light. And she described it leaving the grey Zeta body and blending once again with her human body. So a lot of the time, we're not even in our human form when we go on board craft. We may be given another avatar to do certain work on board craft. So we are so intimately connected to many of these intelligences, and that's a big one to take on board.
I'm just asking my mob how all this works. I'm getting some really interesting information about this. So unlike the movie Avatar, so the avatar is asleep and in stasis when the consciousness is not inhabiting it. I feel like what you're talking about, when their consciousness joins their body, that it's either a mantis or a grey or another form, that there is already consciousness, a part of their soul, their oversoul, inhabiting their body, but the consciousness that inhabits their physical form is joining that consciousness and merging with that in their ET form. I mean, how does that all work? I mean, have you been given that information? That this is something that I'm receiving right now, because like when their consciousness is in their human sleeve or form or vehicle, like that ET body is not in stasis or asleep. It's still operating. It's still operating.
Yeah.
Have you been given that information?
They've not. It's an interesting point that you bring up. I do know, from many years ago, one experience explaining that when she went up to do work on board craft, there was a consciousness that wasn't hers, but was one of the ETs that was inhabiting her body, keeping it going, and just generally utilizing it while she was. And that was interesting that she said that. It's like, so it wasn't completely in stasis or anything. It was still activated, but it was. And there's a case where I heard from a young man who was explaining that sometimes the ET consciousness is utilizing their body while they're busy doing something on board craft. So they're experiencing what it's like to be human for a very short time. So there may be a lot more to that. I don't know, but that's as much as I've come to understand. And, why not? Because it's all about data information, isn't it? And about understanding each other's consciousness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm just getting the analogy of the electricity, animating the soul is like the electricity that animates, that turns on the oven or the toaster or whatever, the television, it turns it on, but you can take away electricity and you can add more. It's like their consciousness can come and join us in this vehicle, this sleeve, this body, and flow through this body and have an experience of what it's like to be in a human mind and a human body and a human personality, and sort of join us. I had a healing many years ago, 25 years ago, from a guy that was out here. I was putting on the Academy of Light, facilitating it, and he fascinated me. He said that he was an ET here on Earth to change that. I think it was one of the first times I had heard that conversation, and I put on some groups in my home for him. But yeah, after the healing, I had a healing with him. I felt like there was some other aspect that joined me in my human form and was looking out of my eyes. Some people call that a walk-in, but it wasn't a complete walk-in, but was looking out of my eyes and seeing life in a human perspective through a human for the first time. Like I was in this ugly street in sort of Western, in the streets of Sydney, crammed with birds sitting on wires, and it was very unbeautiful, but the consciousness that was flowing through me was just going, wow. look at this is amazing. And I was thinking, it's just an ugly street in Sydney. It's not that amazing. So that's possible too, that we can join that consciousness in another form, and they can join us too, right? Have you had any of that spoken to?
Well,
it
brings to mind the experience, and I've had this experience a few times, of overshadowing, where another consciousness will speak through you, and your language is different, your behavior is different, your consciousness is sort of stepped aside. And I've had that kind of experience where I've been almost like put aside, and I'm aware I'm put aside, and there's been another intelligence speaking with different mannerisms and different ways of articulating things. So it's not you, and you're aware that you're not quite in your body in that way. So I think there's lots of different ways that these intelligences or spirits, sometimes it's a human spirit that's doing it. It doesn't necessarily have to be ET. It can be ET, of course, as well. I think we have that capacity to share the container,
yes.
this at times. So why not an ET? If it's available for a short time for an experience, why not?
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, like a soul is a soul is a soul is a soul, whether it's inhabiting a animal body, a mountain, a planet, an ET, a spacecraft. Who was I talking to the other day? And they said that their consciousness, it was one of my groups. Yeah, he said that he's had the experience of being a spaceship, like his consciousness was the spaceship, like a spacecraft. They're conscious beings, some of the spacecraft.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, it goes to, sorry, I was going to say, one of the children, that the 7-year-old was explaining, by the way, that he was an ET from the future, and he was like a Grey Zeta, and had come into this and has come into this time. But he was, I'm just trying to think of what else he was saying about that. He'd come in to bring information, and understanding and what have you. But he also mentioned that he'd been at the time of the dinosaurs, and he'd also been, I think, a hare, or like a rabbit, one of the big rabbits called a hare or whatever. So he was commenting on the fact that he'd been other forms. And the bottom line is, it seems like, from what I'm hearing from some of the children, is they've been different forms, from plant life to animal life that we see as animal life. It's all a different kind of consciousness that they're learning from. And I always remember this 6-year-old explaining to me that he was talking to this meteorite that he was holding in his hand. And the meteorite was actually communicating with him because it had an intelligence, a sentience, just like crystals do, have this kind of, if you like, sentience that we're not always connected to, but children and certain people that are drawn to crystals connect to that. And he was saying that with the meteorite, he explained that it didn't, how it landed, what happened to it, and what happened. His mother said to him, well, how do you know what this meteorite is saying? How are you communicating? He said, it's all in my head. It's telling me this. So what we've got to realize is, everything, from what my understanding has come to, is the possibility that everything has a sentience. I mean, it's, in a way, it's like looking at when people do psychometry, for example, and they hold something that belongs to somebody else, and suddenly they get images or understanding about that person from what they're holding. It could be a bit of jewelry that's connected to them or whatever. What we're realizing now is that takes on, if you like, information. Everything takes on information, just like somebody can read information from a room that they say is haunted or whatever. So we have this ability to tap into that information, and or the intelligence, if it's a crystal or if it's a plant or if it's an animal. And those that talk to animals, I know a veterinary surgeon from Chile who said that she's very happy to help people who've lost a pet, because she communicates with their pet and gives them information to the owners, including the ones that are still alive. If the pet has something to say to the owners, she'll translate that and give the information to the owners about what their pet is saying. This is a veterinary surgeon as well that's talking like this. So this isn't just, you know, when you look at the fascination now we have of people that called animal communicators. Why not? When you've got children that can do it, you've got very credible people that can do it. This is the new human. This is where we're going, guys. And when we all get switched on, this will be part of our awareness and our connection to everything, which is what we're being taught, I think, by these intelligences.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question here. I don't recall if Mary has ever said if she's had a past life regression experience.
Yeah, you know, this is not fair. I have to keep, you know, I'm very good at telling everybody else's stories. So I'm putting me on the spot. Okay, I have had a couple of them. One of them that I often relate to, and I think it's a little bit of the warrior part of me that doesn't care what people think anymore or whatever, is because I did have a regression where I was a Roman soldier. And I'd never had a regression before. I didn't think I was going to get anything at all. It's with me. I'm always very cautious about anything that I relate of my own. But what was fascinating to me that gave it even more substance, in that regression, I did 3 lives, but the Roman soldier one was particularly clear because I was a very bored farmer's boy and I was seeing the Roman legions recruiting, and they said, you know, do you want to come and join us? And I looked at the uniform and thought it looked great. And I rather fancied myself in the Roman, in all the gear. And so I joined the this legion, and we were going actually across Europe towards England, you know, Britannia then. And I remember being asked, who was I fighting? And I said, we're fighting the Gauls. I didn't know about this prior to my regression, so I didn't realize what I was saying, other than that's what came to me. And I remember very distinctly being asked, what's it like to fight and you know, and kill? And I said, oh, you don't, you know, what do you feel like? And I said, you don't feel, you just kill. And I remember in my other part of me saying, well, that sounds pretty horrible, Mary. You know, that's pretty blunt, isn't it? You know, not Mary at all. But the last bit of it was quite fascinating, because I said, we're going to Britain or Britannia or whatever. And I said, we're going to fight the barbarians. And I meant the Scots, because I went to Hadrian's Wall. I was a guard on Hadrian's Wall. And I remember thinking, as I called them barbarians, that the guy that was doing the regression was Scottish, and he was not going to be very happy with me calling them barbarians. And I remember thinking, I'm not going to like that, you know. My point is that there were words that I would never have normally articulated in that way at all. And it was like a movie. It was like a movie. And I didn't have to think. It just came one after the other as he asked the questions. And I actually got stabbed in the back. I think that was the end of me on the wall by one of the barbarians or whatever. But it was really very clear. And I did 2 others. One was live in Italy and another one in France, where I used terminology and language that I would never in normal circumstances use. And that's what gave it substance to me and credibility. And I didn't expect to see anything. It wasn't like there was an expectation. So I've done hundreds. I've facilitated hundreds of these past lives now and whatever. And I have absolutely no doubt, when people, particularly when they get very emotional about it as well, when they're going through that experience, you know that it's touching something very deep within them. And it often helps them understand themselves and in a whole different way to before. And they can be very, very valuable for some people to understand more of their motivations and what have you. So, yeah, it's an interesting exercise.
Absolutely. It's amazing to think that you would, as a soul, elect to come into a human form that felt so completely cut off from our connection to God or our connection to each other, that killing, like that feeling anything, like you don't feel anything. You're just like a killing machine. Like we watch it on our screens all the time. Yeah. And yet we elect to have, like, from that higher perspective, we think, I can't even imagine what that would be like. So let me come and be a Roman soldier. It's like a killing machine. Yeah, it's not like you're evil.
So weird.
choosing
It
that
was so weird,
experience.
and it was like I could see the warriors in front of me, and I was just hacking them down,
Yep.
no feeling, just like a robot. And I remember
Yep.
thinking, it's not very nice, Mary, to say that, that you don't feel, you just kill. Who
Yep.
says things like that, So there's this other talk going on saying this is not okay, or whatever. But that gave it credibility because it wasn't the way that I think and normally would behave. And coming
Yeah.
out with, I didn't know Gauls then. I didn't know the Scots were called barbarians, for example, of all things. They came later. So it was the validation of the information that I got that gave it even more tangibility and very useful,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it can be quite a
Yeah.
journey.
I just want to remind people that you're listening to Accentuate the Positive Media with Karen Swain, Awakening Consciousness, and my guest today is Mary Rodwell, and we're on the United Public Radio Network and the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 107.7 and 105.3. And we are talking new humans and star babies, star children today. So with your regressions with the new human star children, the wanderers, the star seeds, it's not like in this time, well, maybe it is, I don't know. It's not like you've spoken to all of them, but they would have to elect to have experiences on planet Earth in our history, or maybe in our future, to be here for this time of shift. It's like, have you encountered many that this life is their first human life, or are they given imprints of what it's like to be human? Like, how does all that work?
Well, it's a good question, and I know there are such things as imprints, but one of them that comes to mind is a 10-year-old that explained this was his very first incarnation, that in his other life he was a blue being. He explained that what his life was as a blue being, but he said, it's my first incarnation on planet Earth, and I picked a parent, a mother that had been on Earth many times so that she could help me through working and understanding being human, because it's actually one of the reasons a lot of star seeds and generations of star seeds want to leave is because they find it too hard. They just say, it wasn't what I expected. I just want to go home because I don't like this planet. I don't understand humans. I don't understand the way they are with one another. It's so barbaric, and it's so different to what I'm used to, that I just can't. And it is so toxic for many of them that they really, really struggle. And I do believe what's behind a lot of teenagers, particularly, that end up going on drugs or alcohol or whatever, is they're trying to dampen down the how they feel about life on planet Earth, because it's so difficult for them. And so especially as they're not able to share their awareness, they can't deal with the fact that their reality is denied. And I remember, and I wrote about this young man in The New Human, but he said to me, Mary, when I was about 10 or 11, my family got fed up with me talking about my awareness, what I was seeing, what I was experiencing. They said, for goodness sake, can't you just be normal and shut this nonsense down and all the rest of it? And he said, do you know what, Mary? He said, I tried to do it because I was fed up of them constantly berating me for talking about what I was seeing, what I was experiencing, and all the rest of it. And he said, I tried it for a short while. And he said, and I came close to committing suicide. He said, because once I shut that down, it was so awful just being in 3D. I couldn't deal with it. So I decided that the only way I could survive is to continue with my multidimensional awareness. He said, but the trouble with that is that when you go to school or whatever, and you're around people, you're constantly picking up about their lives, their traumas, their experience and whatever. And he said, and it's traumatic being multidimensional because you're constantly tapping into other people, others' energies and what have you. And many starseeds say they can't be in crowds, because it's just too hard for them, because they're tapping in. So many are empaths and they're literally connecting to people as they, but he said that if he hadn't opened up again, he would have literally committed suicide.
Oh, gosh. I can so relate to that. As a kid, when all my friends were going to rock concerts, I just didn't want to do the crowds. I just couldn't do the crowds. And I didn't understand why. But yeah. So okay. So the family says, stop all this nonsense. How can we as starseeds communicate to the mainstream mind that doesn't see value in it, how can we communicate that it's not nonsense and that it's valuable, and maybe they need to look at it from a different perspective and stop judging it as not being normal? I mean, this sounds like I've already asked this question, but I think we can't ask this question enough at this time, because I think that's the skill we need to be able to communicate to people that, yeah, this is the new normal. This is the new normal. Hello, wake up. This is the new normal.
Yeah. I think it's often the new age and even the metaphysical can sometimes be a barrier because of the language that they use. And it's the language that puts people off, because immediately you're a bit woo-woo, aren't you, or whatever. So, often I say, especially when I'm talking to more mainstream interviews or whatever, I use mainstream language as much as possible. So instead of saying, oh, psychic, I'll say, oh, you're very intuitive, aren't you? You have that kind of feeling, or that knowing, or that sensing. That is fine by people. They can deal with that. They can deal with a knowing or a sensing or a feeling. If you say you're clairsentient or clairaudient or clairvoyant, that immediately puts a lot of people off, particularly if they've been educated, particularly higher education, because that makes them even more limited in the way they're prepared to use that kind of language or explore that kind of language, because it's like astrology and what have you as well. You're part of the woo-woo. So I'm very aware that I use as much as possible language that most people can relate to. So it really can be just the way that you explain things. I'll say, you ever get that sense, that someone's going to ring you or whatever, and they do. Isn't that amazing? I don't have to say, you could be precognitive, for example, even if you might be. I get many that say, a few days ago, in my head, I got this image of this and this was going to happen, and 2 days later it did. Isn't that weird? And I'm saying, well, it actually just means that you're tapping in. You've got an ability to tap into future events. You don't even have to use the word precognitive or whatever. There is a name for that. If you want to know what the name is, it's this. So a lot of the time, it's the lack of education and understanding of concepts or terms that for some of us in the field we use all the time. It's like using the word Merkaba, your light body. Some people won't have a clue what you're talking about, especially if they're opening up to all of this stuff and that just sounds weird and they can't go there. You can say, well, we actually have an energy body or a light body, we've all got one, and in certain cameras you can actually see that or whatever. So if you can ground the information and keep it as much as possible mainstream terminology, more and more people then can come in and have a look at it and maybe start to open up to, oh, that might be a possibility or whatever. It's just that, a lot of these terms, it's almost like academic terms when when you're an academic and you're using all these fancy terminology. I mean, we do it in the medical profession, or use all these terms, and most people haven't got a clue what you're talking about. So it immediately distances you from the person that you're trying to talk to. So it's about normalizing in language. It is normalizing it and explaining it in a way they can understand. And that's something that I've learned counselling for 30 plus years, 35 years or whatever. I was always taught, when you're talking to a trader, you talk like a tradie. When you're talking to an academic, you know what I mean? You use the language that is familiar with. And given the fact that we're in the weird and wonderful world, which, is what we're dealing with, it's even more important that we ground it so people can connect to it, relate to it.
Absolutely.
And that's been,
what
I'm talking about.
Yeah, it reminded me of when I insisted, I think it was about the year 2000, that my brothers both had computers that I said, have you got an old computer you don't need? I need to learn a computer. And my older brother said, what do you want the computer for? And I said, I don't know. I could do astrology charts on the computer. And he said to me, well, that's not important enough. Anyway, my little other brother said, I'll give you one of my old computers. And he was trying to explain to me how to use it, the hard drive, the floppy disk. And I said to him, you're talking Japanese. I mean, I just didn't understand any of the terminology. And he started to explain to me, imagine you're on a desk. The desktop is the screen. And just the way he described it in the normal language, it was just beautiful. And that's what you're saying, that if we can use language that people understand, it won't seem so it won't seem so crazy and woo-woo. I mean, I'm thinking, you know, the extraterrestrial beings, the higher consciousness beings, star nations, they have the ability to stay connected to consciousness in and outside the body. And so the death experience, as you say, so many people are dying, we go into this grief and loss, and we go into this suffering over this experience of separation. And yet if you expand your consciousness, you never have that experience of separation. Like I said to you, a friend of mine died, actually a couple of friends in the last weeks, the people just dropping off like flies. And I hadn't seen her for a couple of years physically, but I have full connection to her now that she's in spirit. I would have had connection maybe even when she wasn't in spirit, like out of her body. But that feeling of loss isn't there because I have that connection to her. I mean, that's such a beautiful thing. And I think everybody would want that, wouldn't they? When they expand their consciousness and understand they're multidimensional.
Well, the way that I look at it, and those that I've been helping to reconnect to that, and with tools that give them more confidence, because often they're questioning, is it real, or is it my imagination? They always get confused between the two of their multidimensional self and their imagination, their creativity. And I said there's a distinct difference between the two of them that we have to understand, because our 3D self thinks before it speaks. Our multidimensional self speaks before we think. That's the difference. And they say, well, how do I know it's not my imagination? I say, well, it's a distinctly different process. When you look at something that's real, and I've said this countless times, it's like your bedroom. If I said, bring to mind your bedroom right away, in your mind's eye, you know where the window is, you know where the door is, you know where the bed is or whatever, because it's your bedroom and it's real. You know, that's in front of you. But if I said to you, create a bedroom, you'd have to think, well, how big would the room be? Where would I put the bed? Would I have one or two windows? What would the curtains be like, or whatever? You know, your imagination has to create it. Whereas when you're getting, you know, subconscious, superconscious, multidimensional information, it's instantly in your head before you've had a time to think. And that's the difference. It's instant information. Once you get that, you're operating then. Your left brain, you think before you speak. Right brain, you speak before you think. That is the distinct difference. If it's coming in without you have a chance to even work out why it's there, and someone will say, I got this thought, or I got this light bulb moment. I'm saying, yeah, that's how it works. You don't even know what it is before it's already there. And you're thinking, how did I know that? Or how did that information come there? That is you connected to that superconscious part of you, or your source, your other sources of information, because they use that time when you're quiet, where you're relaxed, where they say, right, we can drop a little thought bomb in here. Here you go. My God, I didn't realize I was so amazing, or I'm so clever, or whatever. What do you think that is? That's you connected to that other part of you. And I said, we're supposed to be working in harmony with our 3D world, because we've got our 3D world and our multidimensional. The multidimensional explains the 3D, but if you're cut off from it, then you don't actually understand what 3D means, because you're cutting off the part of you that actually explains and helps you understand what the hell is going on in your life from a 3D perspective. If you've not got that, nothing makes sense. And yet we have it, but we dismiss it. We dismiss intuition. We dismiss that feeling, or that, oh, I've got a feeling I shouldn't go out today, or whatever. And you know, when I went out, I had this accident or whatever. I should have listened to that feeling. What do you think that is? That's the other part of you giving you the information. Listen to it, because it's telling you something.
Humans can be very stubborn. There's a couple of questions here. Like we get the message over and over and over again, and we dismiss it and we dismiss it and we dismiss it, making it up. No, that's crazy. No, that's nothing. We can be very stubborn. But private, love to know what your real name is. Private. Mary, what does private say here? When you work with people and they have healing and become more intuitive, do they all follow up with you and tell you how much their lives have changed? It's a great question.
Yes, many of them do, because with some of them, they're already opening up. They're still not sure what to. Oh, Cheryl.
It's private. Yeah, go on.
Some are already opening up, because I asked them, do they feel energies, or do they feel presences, or do they find themselves getting downloads of information and they don't know where it comes from, something like this, I know they're ready, really, and they're already connecting. They just haven't taken that final step to find out where that source is coming from and who is it and why are they helping them. And also to explain how it works again, because even though we're all born with it, we lose the confidence that we had as a child to connect in the way where we would trust it. So it's about reminding them how to trust it again and what have
Yeah.
you. What's wonderful with that, once they've connected again and realize some of it's, they will see it as their superconscious higher self. Others will see it as their guardian angels or their gatekeeper or their life guide or the team or whatever. Doesn't matter how they interpret it, as long as what they're getting is accurate, useful, and resonates. And this is when they want to know how to expand on that, because the more you listen to that intuitive part of you, the better you get, the more open you get, the more comes in. It's like when you open the door, you're allowing more and more in, you're going to get more and more confidence. It's been life-changing, some of the work of helping them to connect, because they'll write to me a few weeks later or a month or two later, since that session, Mary, I've opened up and I'm connecting to this, I'm connecting to that, it's making so much sense, my healing's better or whatever. The evidence is obvious afterwards. Of them are absolutely over the moon, because they spent years questioning because they couldn't quite have the confidence in what they were getting until they realized that it was actually, all of it had integrity. And it's just knowing the difference. It's not your imagination if it's coming in spontaneously as it does. It's as clear as that. Once you know the difference between your left brain and right brain, you know what's intuitive and what isn't. And once you've got that, it's plain sailing. All you need to do sometimes is defrag the computer, the spiritual computer, as it were, and get rid of the old programs, which is something I do with them as well. Is that I have a way of assisting them to let go of all the old programs, the limits, the blocks, a kind of, I call it a spiritual defrag, really, of the computer.
Well, that's so important. There's nothing more important than that, really, because you can have these spiritually transformative experiences either in a hypnotherapy session or an NDE, but if you're still being controlled by your programming, it makes no difference in your life, because you're listening to your programming instead of applying what you've been told. Application of the knowledge is key, right? You can get the knowledge through a hypnotherapy session, who you are and why you're here and what what's possible for you, but until you actually apply it to your life, listen and apply it, having one session or a few sessions, or you could have millions, really, it makes no difference to your life. You have to apply it. You have to listen and listen more. Yeah, absolutely. I had a client once who was just the most extraordinary psychic. When I tuned her into her guides and everything, she was there, they're getting this incredible information. Actually, I've had quite a few clients that are like this, downloading this incredible information and then not listening to it and writing it off and like, nah, and just not listening to it and not applying it to their life. And it just blew me away. And I couldn't tell them how amazing they were. And yet they just didn't believe it because of the conditioning of, I'm not worthy enough, I'm not good enough, I want to fit in, I want to be liked. The conditioning of wanting to fit in and be liked and not wanting to be who I really am. Yeah. There's another great question here from my friend Shirley Wellwood, recently on ATP in the NSO. There was a discussion about Rh negative blood types having possible alien connection. Do you know about this and could comment?
Well, yes, there is often a connection to Rh negative. And many of my clients, when they look at the questionnaire, I actually don't think I've got it in the questionnaire, but they may share the fact that they've got Rh negative. And I think there's 15% of the planet that have Rh negative. And I think that's probably one of the Star Nation species that perhaps has added their DNA. We know at least 12 different species have done that. It could be as many as 22. And they're obviously a specific implant, if you like, or DNA connection to this particular species that has Rh negative. So it's actually quite a significant pattern to Rh negative, and I suspect it's one of the many that have added a bit of themselves into our genome.
Yeah. I hope that answers the question for Shirley. Yeah, we'll be talking about that last week. I think we were. I had Kevin Briggs on the show talking about consciousness last week. Was that last week? I don't know. Time has no meaning for me. Do you find that? Do you get sort of mixed up with time? Like last week could be yesterday. It could have been a year ago. It's so weird.
Yeah.
But talking about consciousness, and I had this epiphany as he was talking. Like when we do awaken to our multidimensional ability, like who we are as multidimensional, we have the ability to be physical, astral, energetic, orbs. Like we can be in all these different states, and being physical adds another state that we can explore and experience. Like that's how he lives. He can project his consciousness. He can live his body at will. He can transform into an energy orb, and the creation level, create a spacecraft and transverse the cosmos, and then come back in and put a steak on the barbie and have a beer and just love being physical. It just gives you this variety. But most of us as humans just have the human experience because we don't remember who we are outside the human experience. But having that memory of who we are gives us, being human gives us a wider scope of experience. That was my epiphany I had with Kevin. Is that what some of your clients are telling you about being human rather than suffering in the human experience? They're loving it because they have now something else to play with.
Absolutely. The more that they've connected to who they are, in terms of their multidimensional selves, when they're aware of other aspects of themselves, going to other universes, parallel realities and what have you. And one of the times I was connecting to my own team, if you like, was they were sort of showing me a limited way of understanding that we've got the oversoul, if you like, as the palm of your hand, and aspects of ourself are traveling, experiencing all the time in other realities, parallel, different timelines, parallel realities. And what we often do when we dream is we're actually experiencing us making different choices and having different and living those different choices or whatever and what have you. And I remember once being in a dream of a dream. And I remember in the dream thinking, I've got to notice this dream and I've got to actually look at what it's telling me and what have you. But I was in the dream saying that about the dream when I was dreaming. So it was like, another dimension. And the more I think you're awake to that, the more fascinating it becomes and the more enriching it becomes, because you start to see more of who you and what you are, and the fascination of what is reality at the end of the day. This huge mind-blowing concept that we are so multidimensional. That is, I think, just a limited way of explaining that. And I remember being with a very intuitive lady once, and I don't know if I've ever mentioned this to you, Karen. I might have done. This was many years ago when we had little tape recorders, with the little tapes going around, and I would record someone's session. And I was recording this lady's session. At the time, we weren't aware, other than the fact she went into in the regression, she went into another dimension. And I was getting to explore that dimension and what have you. And we thought, oh, well, that was it, except for we had a reality check with her, because she rang me up at the end of the day listening to the tape. And what was fascinating was, then I used to play music. I don't anymore, but we had the music staying static the whole time, sounding normal. When she's going into that other dimension, her voice becomes really, really high pitched and really different. And then my voice still sounds normal. Hers is sounding really high pitched as she's going into this other dimension. And then my voice becomes high pitched, but the music stays the same.
Wow.
So the tape recorder had actually somehow given us a reality to what actually we both experienced, because I was obviously following her in. And it was only because of knew. And she said, this is so weird, Mary, because it's all recorded. It's just all recorded there. So we don't know half the time what we're up to, because we've got no way of testing it and looking at it. So I think there is so much more we're going to learn about our capabilities. And I'm sure I've mentioned this to you before about the film Lucy, and I'm sure I have. I can't remember. If you look at the film Lucy, which is about a drug dealer, a lady who has the drugs put inside her abdomen, and they're a new kind of drug, and they're very powerful. And I think the container splits and the drug seeps into her. What this drug does is start to activate her DNA, and she becomes more and more multidimensional as more of the drug is absorbed by her body. It activates her to the point where she literally becomes light ultimately. And
Yeah.
it's like it's giving a message that we have got dormant DNA, 90 to 95%. They don't know what it does. And this, I believe, is our dormant DNA waiting for their right frequency to awaken us into more of who and what we are. And I feel Lucy was a kind of an image of what could happen ultimately when we do get activated sufficiently to realize just who and what we are in terms of a multidimensional person, where she was just seeing more and more of the matrix, more and more of the hologram, where she literally became light. And I think this is where we're going. This is the
Yeah.
potential of
It's got some great visuals in that movie depicting that. Absolutely. If it wasn't for the chasing and the violence and the shooting, like every damn Hollywood movie, I was thinking before when you were speaking, there are so many movies made about aliens, and they always demonize the aliens. They always make the aliens or the higher consciousness the evil force. The alien threat, the alien. What I was watching the other day, they were saying the alien virus is killing humanity. They're always making, but the one movie that I love is Powder, where a higher conscious being, like a starter, is it's just that movie. God, I fell in love with that movie. Depicts how a highly evolved conscious being, not understood by humanity. I mean, there is a little bit of chasing and all that sort of thing, but it's a movie that's come to us about consciousness without the violence. And it explains how he's not understood. He could read people's minds, and he feels connected. Yeah, it's amazing. I love that movie. But so there are a few movies out there like Lucy and Powder that do depict what we're talking about. Love your work, Mary. Susan says, navigating these times. So I know that when you're doing your hypnotherapy sessions, I just wanted to talk about what hypnotherapy is, like how we can access this outside of the session. So hypnotherapy is relaxing the mind enough to access different parts of consciousness, right? So when you're putting a client under, you're just relaxing them and relaxing them. It's like a deep meditation, really. And it's great to have a facilitator do that for you, to ask the questions so that, when you are accessing past lives or superconscious or subconscious, you've got someone that can help you navigate that. But as we relax and relax and relax, we can gain that access ourselves, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, what puts people off is they say, well, it's very hard for me to clear my mind and not think about anything.
Right.
But what we're doing with hypnosis in most cases is we're using the sensing, feeling, but often the visual as well. So that gives them a way in. And once they say, well, how do I know the difference between using the visualization to get you to a certain point where you can start accessing maybe a past life or a past experience? There's a big shift from saying, now you're seeing a door. Are you ready to walk through? Look at your feet. I'm not telling you where you're standing. I'm not telling you whether, are you inside or outside? They've got to see that. They either see it or they don't. You're not telling them what to see. From that point on, what's in front of you is what you're saying. You're not telling them what's in front. So there's a shift from using visualization to get you to that point of opening the door, and then allowing the subconscious to take them further into whatever the experience is or whatever. And that's what I say to people, that the visualization is simply a tool ultimately to get them into the process of what are they seeing. And you're not explaining any of that. They're telling you what they're seeing or whatever. And it's not scary, and you don't have to be somnambulistic. As a lot of people say, I was sort of aware where I was and all the rest of it. I said, yes, for most cases to start with, you don't go that deep. Only about 20% of people go deep somnambulistic. Most of us don't. And I said, it's like watching television and seeing a really good program that you're fascinated by, and round you somebody's making a cup of tea and somebody else is cooking dinner or whatever. You can hear it going on, but you're fascinated with what's actually going on the telly and that particular program. So you phase out of that to a certain extent, but you're not completely switched off. It's exactly the same with this. You're just very focused on where you're going, that whatever's going on, whether you can hear the birds singing or whatever is around you, doesn't get in the way of what you're seeing. So it doesn't have to be deep trance. Everybody seems to think they've got to completely go unconscious. And I explain to them there's only a certain percentage that ever do, and they're usually deep meditators or whatever. For most people, that isn't the experience, but it doesn't stop you accessing your subconscious once you feel relaxed enough and you trust the facilitator. The reason some people don't get anything is, I said, sometimes it's because they're scared. They're afraid of what they're going to see, so they block it. I said that's one reason. Or they may just not completely trust the individual that's taking them there either. They may not just have that bit of extra confidence as well. So they're often the only reasons you can't do it. I said for most, I said it.
Absolutely. Well, if you go completely unconscious, you're not going to be talking anymore, so you can't tell people what you're seeing. You can't be unconscious. You've got to stay conscious. You've got to stay conscious, but just accessing different realms. I asked a client who's just amazingly psychic to experiment with past lives. I said, because she's tapped into her guides, I said, you know, in all of this, we're guided in every step of the way, and I know you are too. And Mary and I have discussed that when we take our clients through journeying, we journey with them. It's like I'm there, I'm seeing what they're seeing, and you do that too. And I think that's so important for counselors to do that. So I asked her to experiment with it, my client, and she did a past life regression on her husband and her daughter, and then came back to me the next week. And it was amazing what she did. I didn't tell her how to do it. I said, ask your guides what to do. They can show you every step of the way. And she did. She just asked the guides, what do I do? How do I get these people there? And it was amazing what she did. It was just a bit of an experiment we did that was wonderful. Sarah Jane has a question here. Do you believe, and this dovetails with something I was going to ask you about navigating these times, these crazy times, do you believe in the flash of light that everyone's talking about? She says that she had a dream, my whole body flash of light. So what are your guides and your clients saying about the event, the flash of light? Everyone is talking about it.
Some are definitely.
Have we already had it with all that aurora borealis going on all over the world recently? That's what I'm thinking.
Look,
go on.
they're saying there's more to come, and that it was going to be, in a way, many have tapped into the possibility that it's actually going to be a frequency that comes from the sun, some kind of solar flash that will activate more of the DNA and instigate the shift and what have you. I think we've already had some of that, and I think 2012. Actually, the numbers of people that were activated around 2012 is quite amazing. I'll say to them, when did it all change for you? And they'll say 2012 or whatever. So I think something happened to some. I think depending on the soul agreement will depend on how many is affected with what's going on now. But certainly in the last few years, there's been a huge activation and awakening as well. So it makes a lot of sense because everything is frequency. And, you know, we're all connected in the sense of that we're all part of the stars or whatever. I wouldn't discount that at all. My own intuition has been it's going to happen very fast. And they've not given me too much information other than what I'm hearing from others as well, is that this shift will happen very, very quickly when it does happen. So I think we're all being geared up for that. I think what's going on right now maybe is a precursor to something like that, but I was told it was going to be very fast, so it may very well be this solar energy that hits the planet and touches our consciousness, and it will be very quick. So it makes sense to me, but that's just how I feel.
So your clients have been talking about it. Have they been talking about it?
New Earth as well. You know, the shift frequency, because many have said, look, the new Earth's there. It's just waiting for us to get to that frequency so that we can join it.
Move into that frequency. Dolly was saying that I was watching her on the light gate that the ETs are not in their spaceships around Earth right now because of the solar activity. There is just like this really intense solar activity at the moment. And you know, all that aurora borealis that that happened recently, and so it's interfering with their navigation system. So they're not flying in our skies right now because of the solar activity. So I thought that was kind of interesting. So things are ramping up, kids. Things are happening.
Yeah.
Cheryl
Yeah.
says, so what is the reason for the chemtrails? Oh, that's another question. I don't know. Have you received any of that information through your guidance or your clients? What the reason for
Well,
the
we know
chemtrails?
that there's so many agendas with the chemtrails, from weather modification, dropping. That's supposedly the primary one. Others are saying that they're also putting in all sorts of other, what should I say, things to make us unwell or whatever. But also there was new information coming in that some of it actually is to help with those that have been targeted or taken on certain things, that it's actually some of the new stuff is actually going to be helpful. So there might be those that are on our side, if you like, the ones that want to put things right on the planet, that are using that as a medium to put stuff in our skies that may help those that have had certain drugs inserted, let's put it like that, and helping with that as well. So there might be a positive to some of them. So I think it's a mix from what I'm hearing. That's all I can say, is as much as I know. So there's not necessarily, it's not always from the what I call the dark side, for want of a better word.
Yeah, I think we've been so conditioned to accentuate the negative. Like we hear a story and we go into drama and judgment and blame. It's the human conditioning. We've been conditioned to be like that, and it's not who we are. You know, being curious and seeing the higher perspective, it's who we are when we awaken to our multidimensional aspect, instead of going into the blame game, you know, blaming some government or the cabal or the evil people or the evil aliens. God, the blame game is the biggest game on earth, don't you reckon, Mary? We just want to blame something.
We've incarnated knowing the deal. And the deal is that we're learning and growing from understanding this kind of energy that we're all facing at the moment. But I do say to people, what you have to realize when it looks really dark and there doesn't seem like there's a lot positive going on, you don't get all these new wonderful children that are being born and have been born over the last so many years, with all their awareness and all their understanding. They've not come here for a waste of time. They've come in because they know they can do something. They know that they can shift this. And, you know, because there would be no point otherwise. And I've always been very clear on that, because I'm coming across these children left, right, and center that are coming in with these gifts and this awareness. I was talking to a lovely little lassie a week ago, a 7-year-old, explaining how she's come in as a healer, and explaining she was even did a little video of her healing her mum, bringing all the language and the movements to do the healing on a mum who had got a problem with, I think, a neck or something or other. I'm a healer. And I said, how do you understand what you're doing? She says, well, I can bring, you know, they can tap into the frequencies that I bring in. She says, but I'm activating their own healing abilities. So she's not only doing that, but she's actually activating them as well. And she's fully conscious of what she's doing. I mean, this is a 7-year-old, quite confident, quite comfortable in explaining who she is. And she's also mentioned, of course, that she's part human and part blue avian. She says, I'm a mix of both. And she connected and understood this when she finally understood this when she was 4, that she was coming as a healer, bringing the frequencies, but she's a part of both, part blue avian, and the family comes and sees her, explains very comfortably how she's part of them and how she understands she's here to teach as well. And it's like talking, it's a 7-year-old to 17-year-old. You know, you're seeing that kind. That's just one, you know, of those that I'm coming across. And this is what I mean. They're not coming with all this awareness, so it's all going to be taken away. And, you know, it makes it's not logical, as Spock would say.
Right, it's not logical, as Spock would say. You know, with everything that's happening, it's threatening the old systems. It's threatening a way of life that people are used to. They're making money from. You know, all the systems have to crash, like the medical system, the food systems, the transport system. And these new children and access to higher technology is threatening all those systems. So there's pushback. And that's what we're seeing as the chaos in the world, the pushback. There's big pushback trying to stop this, trying to stop the evolution. and get people compliant again. And it's not working. It's just not working. But the pushback is creating the chaos. And so Carol says, any new information on space arcs? We've only got 6 minutes left of the live show. Is that a question you can answer in a couple of minutes?
I have no new information than I've spoken about in the last few months about the space arcs. One lady who is in Australia said that she had known about this because she came from middle of Europe, where there had been mythology about something strange that was in their particular country in middle Europe and whatever. And she said it sounds like it may very well have been this information about, you know, these arcs that are everywhere and what have you. Interestingly, the lady I'm going to be speaking about at this new conference, the Awakening Conference that I'm doing in a month's time in Bundaberg, is an Indigenous grandmother. And interestingly, she's an artist as well. And she had done many years ago, I think 2008, she'd done this picture of Australia. And she'd done in the center of Australia a kind of triangular kind of thing. And I said to her, she said, I did this all those years ago. And I said, are you getting any new information about, because the triangle was very much Central Australia in this artwork that she'd done. And she had no idea why she did it at all. And she said, I tuned into the old ones. And she said, and what she'd drawn actually looks very similar to an arc. And I said, well, the whole shape of it and what have you as well. And I got a real sense that maybe somewhere we all know about in Central Australia that's very significant has maybe one of them. And interestingly, she went there only a few weeks ago with her family. And I've got some very interesting images just above Uluru, where she's got 3 interesting little dots moving around and what have you. So I think our friends decided to have a visit as well.
With 4 minutes to go, Mary and I were talking about, we were going to talk about it in Bundaberg, which is about an hour and a half away from Mary. She doesn't have to travel to the other side of the world to attend a conference. And she was like, so great. And I said, what happens in Bundaberg? She said, nothing happens in Bundaberg, but there's an incredible conference happening with mostly the Indigenous, the original people, and a couple of you, like you and who else? Oh, Lee Capitelli, who are going to talk about the star children in Bundaberg. Paul Anthony Wallace is going to be there. Well, that's pretty cool. So I might go up there and check it out, even though it's miles away from me. It's still in Australia. But so things are happening. Things are happening. Well, we've got left 4 minutes to go. Countdown. What was the question I was going to ask? No, I can't remember. But yeah, thank you so much, Mary, for coming on once again. It's been a fabulous conversation sharing this live with you. You're just a wealth of information. Anything else you'd like to share in the next minute or two before we finish?
I'd like to say, if you find yourself getting downloads or anything strange, like writing strange scripts or whatever, you're actually shifting your whole energy system, and they all have a purpose. They're not just you doing strange writing or strange forms or whatever. They have important ways of waking you up, clearing the old, clearing who you are, and allowing you to become more and more of your multidimensional self. So if you are starting to find yourself writing strange things, because I'm going to be talking a lot about that in Bundaberg, and what it actually means in activating more of your DNA and opening you up to more of who you are, that is all happening. And I believe it's happening right across the board, including the children. So there's some, if you're doing that, you're not crazy. All I'm saying is you're one of those that's getting ready to wake up. So it's exciting times, guys. So enjoy the ride.
Yeah, absolutely. It is exciting times. You know, there are people I know that are awake, that are doing it, you know, doing the scribbles and downloading the codes and doing like the alien writing. And I don't know, this, I guess it just activates us, doesn't it? Looking at that writing, it activates us in some way.
It has actually a lot of different purposes. I've got a couple of minutes. I'll just tell you. It clears and opens our higher consciousness. It's doorways. It heals the damage done by learning and the use of English language. It heals the physical structures of our human tech. Receiving and integrating brain hemispheres brings people into a state of alignment within the present moment. Writing the script awakens across a multidimensional realms of creation, enabling proper downloading of information, clearing out dense frequencies, and much more. So that gives you a bit of an idea of what's up.
Fantastic. I want to thank you again. Love you big time. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Can't wait to have another conversation. I might see you in Bundaberg.
Oh, that would be wonderful. Okay, Karen.
Big love to you, Mary. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. See you again soon. Bye for now.